If you are walking through a dense forest at pitch black night and you suddenly hear a heavy twig snap right behind you, your brain does not rationally calculate the statistical probability of a falling branch.
Oh, definitely not. You'd be running.
Right. It instantly floods your entire nervous system with adrenaline and screams a single word: predator. We are biologically hardwired to mistake the unknown for hostility.
Well, to be fair, the organism that pauses to rationally analyze the rustling grass is the organism that gets eaten.
Exactly. That cognitive reflex has kept us alive for hundreds of thousands of years. But what happens when that exact survival instinct becomes a suicide pact?
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, like what happens when the snapping twig is a completely incomprehensible intelligence, like a UFO violating our fundamental laws of physics, or, a black box artificial intelligence operating on a scale we just simply can't fathom.
And we are definitely living in an era where those anxieties are shifting. We look at the recent declassification of military UFO files, or the way nations currently at war treat the weaponization of AI.
It's treated with far more panic than traditional nuclear arsenals.
Exactly, because we are terrified of things that outpace our hardware.
Which brings us to today's focus. We are looking at Harold Plates' 2026 science fiction collection, Bizzybees, a science fiction novella and 2 short stories. The text really digs into the first contact subgenre in a totally different way.
It really does.
And without spoiling the ultimate conclusions of the narratives, the central disagreement we've drawn from the text comes down to this. I firmly maintain that Platt's work is a socio-political critique. He is arguing that humanity's greatest existential threat is our innate militaristic hostility. We just desperately lack empathy for the unknown.
And I take the exact opposite stance.
Oh, I know you do.
Because the text is clearly an epistemological tragedy. He is arguing that our doom isn't driven by some chosen systemic malice. It's structural. It is strictly biological. We possess a fundamental physiological inability to comprehend intelligence that operates on a scale vastly different from our own.
Hold on, before we dive into the plot, let's just make sure we're on the same page for the listeners. When you say epistemological tragedy, you mean a failure of the very tools we use to know it is true, right?
Precisely.
Like our brains simply lack the capacity to process the data in front of us?
Yeah, epistemology is how we know what we know. If your brain is, say, a radio receiver built to pick up FM stations, and the universe suddenly starts transmitting in gamma rays, it doesn't matter how hard you turn the dial.
You're just not going to hear the music.
Exactly. You aren't going to hear it. The tragedy is that the failure is built right into our biology.
Well, I completely disagree that we're just innocent, broken radios in this scenario. Let's look at the title novella, Bizzybees. I think the text is incredibly explicit in how it uses this setting to hold a mirror up to human hostility.
Okay, lay it out.
So the anomaly appears in our solar system and completely erases a distant celestial body, the asteroid Altrera. Earth's military leadership is sequestered down in this dilapidated, rusted-out bunker called Jetweld.
Right.
And they immediately begin orchestrating a response. Under the direction of characters like Commander Cello and Captain Ogden, they instantly deploy asteroid deflectors armed with 200 terajoule fusion bombs.
Which is a completely rational response to a celestial body vanishing. I mean, what else would they do?
Is it rational, though? They don't try to listen. They don't analyze the massive electromagnetic spectrum lighting up around the event to see if it's a communication protocol. They just immediately resort to the most devastating weapons available. Well, I argue that this is a deliberate choice driven by paranoia. It demonstrates how humanity cannot conceive of an interaction that isn't rooted in conquest or defense. We are literally the architects of our own doom because our culture demands an enemy.
See, I think you're projecting malice where there's really only biology. Look at the recurring motif throughout the novella. Civilization is described as a biological organism.
You mean the bunker itself?
Yeah, the Jetweld bunker is repeatedly described in the text as a node. Specifically, the amygdala of civilization.
Which processes fear.
Right, it processes fear and initiates the fight or flight response. When a virus enters a human body, your white blood cells don't sit around making moral choices about whether to attack it.
Sure, but
They act on an autonomic reflex. There is a quote right on the cover of the book. Every civilization thinks it's asking the right question. Few notice they're answering one instead. The military's reaction isn't chosen malice. It is the raw, unthinking nerve firing of an organism that lacks the sensory framework to process what the anomaly actually is.
But you're giving humanity a free pass there. The biological determinism argument falls apart the second you look at the character of Dr. Aram Namor.
Namor is an outlier.
But he proves it's possible. Namor is an exobiologist brought into the Jetweld bunker, and he actually figures the whole thing out. He realizes the anomaly isn't attacking Earth.
Yeah, he realizes it's harvesting.
Exactly. It consumed the asteroid to harvest carbon nanofibers from a dormant human probe that was just sitting on the surface. And why? To initiate trade. Namor even sits down with DeWitt, the economics lecturer, and works out the math showing that trade is universally more energy efficient than conquest.
Even on a cosmic scale, yeah.
Right. So if one node in the network, Dr. Namor, can correctly interpret the anomaly's actions, then the failure of the military brass isn't some biological destiny. It's a structural failure of empathy. It's like a police officer shooting a tourist who is handing back a dropped wallet simply because the tourist reached into their pocket.
I come at it from a different way entirely. Look at how Namor figures it out. He doesn't get there through human empathy or standard diplomatic reasoning.
Well, he uses his background.
He gets there by completely detaching his mind from human survival instincts and adopting the clinical mindset of an apiarist, a beekeeper.
Right. He equates humanity to the bees he keeps at his house in Blackstone.
Exactly. And that mechanism is crucial to understanding the point here. Those bees produce honey purely by instinct. They don't understand Namor's technology, his motives, or the concept of agriculture.
So you're saying the aliens view us as the bees?
Yes. Namor realizes that the builders of the anomaly view us exactly the way he views his bees. We produce carbon nanofibers. So the military responding with fusion bombs isn't some malicious, trigger-happy police officer shooting a tourist. It is exactly like bees stinging a beekeeper.
Oh, come on.
Think about it. When a beekeeper introduces a chemical treatment to a hive to protect it from disease, the bees perceive a massive, alien intrusion. They attack the glove. It is a biological defense mechanism, completely unaware of the beekeeper's actual intent. Commander Sigilo isn't a warmonger, she is a bee protecting the hive from a massive, incomprehensible shadow.
Except she isn't an insect. She is a conscious human being capable of suppressing a reflex. Let's look at the moment of truth in the bunker.
You mean when Namor briefs them?
Yes. When Namor finally tells the room that the anomaly is not a threat, that it is actually awaiting our reply to its trade, Cello's immediate instinct is to reach for her sidearm and threaten to shoot Namor.
Which is panic.
That is pure, unadulterated hostility. She actually says to him, and I quote, "We call it defense when we don't understand the invitation." She admits it right there. The military would rather destroy an interstellar miracle than tolerate the sheer discomfort of the unknown.
I just don't buy that timeline as a moral failure. You are demanding that military leadership suddenly shed millions of years of evolutionary survival tactics in the span of, 4 hours?
They're trained professionals.
But the anomaly erased the mass and gravity of an entire trans-Neptunian object instantly, without an explosion. To any rational biological organism, that looks exactly like annihilation. The fact that Namor figured it out makes him the anomaly, not the baseline.
I disagree. I think it makes him the standard we should be holding ourselves to.
It's like a deep-sea anglerfish trying to comprehend a marine biologist's submarine. The fish doesn't see a scientist, it just sees a blinding, terrifying light that breaks all the rules of its dark world. Even when Namor cracks the code, the civilization brain in the bunker cannot process his insight. The neural pathways of the organism are already locked into a defense response.
See, it's easy to blame the military brass and say it's just a macro-level institutional failure, but the text proves that's not true. If you look at the short story People v. Mariax, this exact same failure happens on an intimate, microscopic level.
The trial story?
Yeah. We follow the crew of the Gay Lussac, an underfunded survey ship landing on the exoplanet Libra 23b. As the shuttle descends the planet's surface, which is covered in these exotic, sugary dust life forms, begins to telepathically infiltrate the crew's minds. The crew experiences absolute whiteout terror.
Right, because the shuttle's engine exhaust is incinerating the dust. It's essentially burning their children alive.
Exactly. And the terrifying part isn't just that the dust communicates, it's how it does it. It literally hijacks the brain's visual cortex so that the crew's own internal monologue is weaponized against them.
It's a great concept.
It is. Their HUDs, their sensor screens, and their own thoughts literally spell out the words death, leave, pain, parent, and child. It is a desperate, screaming plea for mercy. And what does Captain Mariox do?
He lands.
He lands anyway. He willfully ignores the catatonic, terrified pleas of his own crew out of stubborn adherence to a survey protocol. He completely disregards communication when it inconveniences his human objectives.
But you're...
And later, he is convicted of murder in a drumhead trial. This isn't a cognitive limitation. The communication was explicit. Leave. Mariox understood that his crew was in agony, and he proceeded anyway.
You are looking at the outcome and projecting malice onto Marioch's intent, but you're ignoring the epistemological problem at the center of the trial. The Supreme International Court has to grapple with the admissibility of spectral evidence.
Wait, for the listeners who aren't familiar with the legal concept, spectral evidence just means evidence based on dreams or telepathic visions, right? Stuff you can't prove on a physical sensor, like in the Salem witch trials.
Exactly. Evidence that only exists in the mind of the afflicted. Marioch didn't experience the telepathic terror himself. The text makes a huge point of noting that his unique neurology left him completely unaffected.
Which is convenient for him.
But from his perspective, his crew just suddenly suffered a synchronized, inexplicable psychological break. They start screaming about the dust talking to them. How can a human mind rationally process the idea that alien dust is hacking the optical nerves of his crew to project English words?
He didn't have to understand the mechanism of the telepathy. He just had to care that his crew was screaming in agony.
But in the isolation of deep space, a captain has to rely on empirical reality, not sudden shared psychosis. He looked at his instruments, and his instruments said the landing zone was clear. His hardware, both his ship sensors and his own brain, told him there was no threat. And I think this hardware incompatibility is even clearer in the third story of the collection, Live by the Side of the Sea.
Oh, the lighthouse story. That one is deeply unsettling.
It really is, because it completely strips away the military and the sci-fi tech to focus purely on the breakdown of reasoning. A group of people are trapped in a structure they call a lighthouse, forced by mysterious instructions to feed a massive watchlight with their own bodies to prevent the universe from decaying.
Right, they're already at the breaking point.
They're slowly going insane from the isolation and the horrifying moral arithmetic of their situation. Then, a new arrival appears in one of the beds. But it isn't a human being. It's a jet-black cat.
And their entire system of reasoning shatters.
Completely. Why? Because the cat is a mundane Earth animal, in a place it physically cannot exist. They have no framework for a cat in this alien geometry. They debate whether the cat is there to be fed to the light, whether the creators of the lighthouse even know what a human is, or whether the cat is some kind of twisted psychological test.
They just spiral.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective, because look at their reaction to the breakdown of logic. In the lighthouse, they throw the narrator out the door because fear drives them to violence. In Marioch, the captain ignores his crew because protocol matters more to him than their suffering. Protocol drives him to violence.
I wouldn't call ignoring protocol violence, but it leads to it. And in Bizzybees, the military launches fusion bombs because they can't imagine a universe where an overwhelming power wants to trade rather than conquer. Paranoia drives them to violence. There is a consistent through line here. When our understanding fails, our default substitute is aggression. And this tax is specifically anchoring to today's world.
You mean the real-world parallels with artificial intelligence and the UFO declassifications?
Yes, absolutely. Why do we view AI as more threatening than nuclear weapons? We built nuclear weapons. We know exactly what they do. But AI operates in a black box of data processing. We don't understand how neural networks arrive at their outputs.
Right, it's alien to us.
It is an alien intelligence right here on Earth. And because we don't understand it, we immediately ask, How will this be used to destroy us? Just look at how the military in Bizzybees treats the sphere that emerges from the anomaly.
You mean the sphere that the anomaly fires toward Mars?
Exactly. When the anomaly sends a sphere toward Mars, Ogden immediately assumes it's a doomsday weapon. Namor explicitly tells them the sphere is their payment. They harvested the carbon and they accepted our trade. That is a ball of refined material.
But it's moving incredibly fast.
Sure, but because it is moving incredibly fast, the military intercepts it with asteroid deflectors and detonates fusion bombs, completely destroying it. We do this in a real world constantly. We look at algorithmic intelligence, which operates on a scale we can't fathom, and we assume it's a threat. We call it defense because our cultural instinct demands an enemy.
That's an interesting parallel.
The text is showing us that if we don't overcome this hostility, we will destroy the greatest gifts the universe hands us simply because they arrived in packaging we didn't recognize.
I agree entirely that the stories are rooted in modern AI and UFO anxieties, but I insist the actual threat being illustrated is our interpretive limit, not our malice. Let's look at those UFO declassifications.
Okay.
When a military pilot sees an object drop 80,000 feet in a single second without producing a sonic boom, the profound terror doesn't necessarily come from the assumption that the object is going to shoot them. The panic comes from the realization that our fundamental understanding of physics is incomplete.
It breaks the rules.
Yes, the threat is to our epistemology. In Bizzybees, the anomaly consuming the asteroid looked indistinguishable from a cosmic disaster. When intelligence scales infinitely beyond us, its everyday actions appear catastrophic.
Like the way a marine biologist in a submarine appears catastrophic to the anglerfish?
Exactly. If I am a scientist taking a sample from the ocean floor, I am not declaring war on the deep-sea ecosystem. But to the organisms living there, my presence is an apocalyptic event that defies their reality. The book is asking what if the universe is not hostile, but simply far more sophisticated than we are.
But that sophistication still triggers our violence.
Because of the scale. When the sphere is sent toward Mars, it travels at a fraction of the speed of light. To the military, it looks exactly like a kinetic bombardment weapon. It takes an exobiologist who spends his free time studying insect behavior to realize that the aliens just threw a ball of pavement back at us. You cannot blame an organism for failing to process data that falls completely outside its evolutionary programming.
I still think you can.
The tragedy of Bizzybees isn't that we are fundamentally evil, it's that we are biologically trapped in a paradigm of survival that makes first contact mathematically impossible to navigate safely.
Well, it is a fascinating, unresolved tension throughout the book, and I maintain that the text is pleading for intellectual charity. It frames Bizzybees as a cautionary tale, warning us that we have to actively fight our militaristic reflexes. We have to purposefully choose empathy over protocol.
It's just a tall order for biology.
It is, but we have to do what Dr. Namor cried to do and avoid what Captain Mariox and Commander Cello did. If we don't actively choose to overcome our instincts, we will end up isolated and violent, trapped in our own rusty bunkers, shooting at shadows in the dark.
And I still see the collection as a controlled experiment, proving that our cognitive limitations dictate how we misinterpret the unknown. Whether it is telepathic sugary dust on Libra 23b, a completely ordinary black cat inside an impossible lighthouse, or an anomaly hovering at the edge of our solar system, our brains are simply not wired to process the infinite.
We're just the bees.
We are the bees, buzzing furiously inside our little wooden boxes, completely oblivious to the nature of the beekeeper.
Well, we might not agree on whether humanity's failure is a moral choice or a biological glitch, but we certainly agree that Harold Platz's 2026 collection tackles these themes with incredible depth. It completely bypasses the typical spectacle of laser battles and alien invasions to ask much more profound questions about the limits of human intelligence and, how we form meaning from the void.
It is an incredibly sophisticated work. And honestly, whether our greatest hurdle is our socio-political hostility or our biological hardware, the rapid declassification of UFO files and the exponential rise of black box AI mean that humanity is going to have to face these exact questions outside of fiction very, very soon.
Absolutely. We highly encourage everyone listening to explore the text for yourselves and to consider how we might meet the unknown
differently when the time comes. Because eventually, we are all going to be walking through that dark forest, and we are going to hear a twig snap. The question we're left with is this: will we instinctively reach for a weapon, or will we finally have the courage to turn around and simply ask, who is there?